The doctor walks up to me and tells me, Madam, I need to have a conversation with you, and a candid conversation. For the rest of your life, you will never breathe on your own, and you'll never walk on your own again. So you will be stuck to a wheelchair, and you will have to carry oxygen.
Were you scared?
For me, I was very angry. I was like, no, that's not my message. I told him, no, imagine I will walk, I will breathe, and I refused. In my mind, I was like, return to sender. That is not my message. I am going to walk, I am going to breathe on my own. So I was hooked to so many machines. I'm like, dakika mbili tu hivi. I'm in all these machines, and there's a monitor and checking all these things that I'm thinking, okay, things happen quite fast. Because I couldn't sleep with the noise, I yanked, I removed everything. I told them I need to sleep, and I can't sleep with this noise. I'm going crazy. So when I yanked everything, apparently at that point is actually when I died. Actually, according to the doctor, I died and I was resuscitated. This time, my husband has been called and he's been told that I've taken a turn for the worst because the way it's going. And then they put my things in a paper bag and gave my husband. My son came down, and when he came down, he found the dad sitting outside here. And from his demeanor and the way he looked, my son had gone. And so my son, he tells me he ran up. He almost fell as I was running up the stairs because we were like, my God, mommy has died. Mommy has died. And then my husband is trying to be strong for them and everything. So each one of them handled it in their own way. When people had COVID, you were not treated as a human being. You were treated as a statistic. Because even when the statistics were being read, it's this number of people have COVID. These ones have come out of hospital. So you are a number. You are not actually really a human being, unfortunately.
And to the people who believed that COVID never existed?
Oh, it existed. It existed. I will send you photos of my lungs, how they looked, so that they can see how my lungs looked. I'll send you photos of how I looked when I was in hospital. Yeah.
Welcome to another episode. Thank you so much for always coming back to watch our videos. If you're watching for the first time, my name is Aurelia Ngina. Thank you so much for supporting our work. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to my channel at Aurelia Ngina. Now, where were you during COVID-19? We all know the COVID pandemic that led to a lot of people losing their lives, businesses, employment. As we speak right now, there's some people who have not yet fully recovered, and we pray to God that things change. So today's episode, my guest, she is a survivor of COVID-19, and she's someone who has been here before. And the last time she was here, we had a conversation about dementia, a conversation that you people received so well, the feedback, the responses, it was just wow. I love the fact that you got something on how you can handle someone with dementia. Anyway, allow me to introduce again Elizabeth Mutunga. Elizabeth, welcome again to the show.
Asante sana.
How have you been?
I'm good. And you, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right.
Yes, you're looking so lovely, more beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. That makes me feel good. We rarely take compliments, so when you're given, it is good to receive compliments.
Yeah, the last time we had a conversation about dementia, and the community, it was just overwhelming. They received the conversation so well. I could see comment and people are like, they could relate with your story. And I decided, why not invite you again for another conversation, part 2 of your story.
Thank you.
You're a survivor of COVID-19.
Yes, I am. Yes.
And unfortunately, most of people doubted if COVID existed. Yes. But before we talk on that, please introduce yourself once again to the people who are watching you for the first time.
Okay. All right. My name is Elizabeth Mutunga. I am the CEO and founder of the Alzheimer's and Dementia Organization, Kenya. And yes, a COVID survivor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, God gave you another second chance, and it's because there's a purpose. Maybe you could take us through what really happened. Where were you at that time?
In 2019, actually, when COVID was starting, around December, I had traveled. So wherever I was, I could see the news and what was being said about what was happening in the world about COVID. And so when I came home in January. Even when I was getting to the airport, I knew we would be checked and all those things. But there was not much of activities when I walked into the country. And so finally in March, that's when now that we had the first lockdown.
Yeah.
But for a very long time, I keep saying, like I said earlier, my dad was a policeman. So I am one of those people who follow things to the letter. And so whatever we were told to do, how we were told to behave, how we were supposed to do stuff, I followed it to the letter. And went on like that. I am the one here taking care of my mom. And so the rest of my siblings are away. So even when I used to go to my mom's house, when I'm downstairs, I would call her, I tell her, I am here, open the door. So she would open the door. There was a certain route I would use. So I would get into her house, drop her things, and leave. So we went on and on. Then around October, my daughter was having a birthday. So I went with my daughter to my mom's and we had a cake and everything. But I started realizing I'm struggling to breathe. But you know how you just ignore. And I was, you know how that time they would tell you these are the symptoms of COVID, the cough, the what. And for me, I would keep checking. And my sister would call me and tell me, why don't you have yourself checked? And I'm like, no, there are no symptoms of COVID. But later I came to find out, according to my kids, that I was really coughing. But I actually did not even realize I felt that I was coughing. Anyway, so we went for my daughter's birthday, and I started realizing it's not doing very well. Anyway, so in November, I went to Galleria to do shopping. So when I was at Galleria, we went around with my daughter picking the things that we needed to pick. And by the time I pushed the trolley to where the car was, I was panting. And I kept telling my daughter, why am I so tired nowadays? But also I'd added a bit of weight. And so I remember I journal a lot. So in one of my journals, I'd written on 12th of November, hey God, I am so big. I really need to lose weight. That is what I wrote on 12th of November. So in November 2020, I woke up in the middle of the night, around 15th of November 2020. I woke up with a lot of pain in my stomach. And so because it was curfew, there was curfew then, so we were stopped by the police, and my husband said that I was not well, so I was taken to hospital. I was put on pain medication, a drip. I was there for like an hour. The doctor said, okay, this should help you go back home. But when I came back home, I was still in a lot of pain. I went back a second time to hospital the same night. So I went back at 2 a.m. So the doctor said, instead of releasing you again, why don't we let you stay here? We observe you, and then we will know what the problem is. So that was on Saturday. So we were going into, actually it was Sunday morning. So Sunday, they take me in for a scan. They check my stomach. Then the report comes that I have a burst cyst in the stomach and it was bleeding. That is what was causing the pain. So the doctor says, okay, we need to clean you up. But I was also finishing my thesis. I was doing my master's. So I was like, no, Daktari, I have to go and defend my thesis. Please release me. I go defend my thesis. Actually, I will not die. Let me go. I'll come back after I've defended my thesis to come clean me up. And the doctor agreed. So he released me on around 17th or 16th. So I came home, and when I came home, actually he released me on 17th. So I come home. That night I was feeling very sick. So I told my husband, you know what, why don't we go and check for this COVID? Maybe it is COVID. Or we just check because I'm not feeling well. So we went actually again at night to hospital. We did the COVID test. Of course, that time we're not getting the results immediately. And so we came back home. But I had this fear in my stomach, and I don't know what was it. I'm usually not a coward, but sometimes but that day I just felt a fear run over me, and I was like, what's going on? So anyway, I was released from hospital, came home. Then I called my friend who's a doctor. I told her, come to my house. I feel like I'm struggling to breathe. And I've also realized that my heart is really pounding. Just come and check on me. So she says, okay. So she comes with a nurse. And that day also a friend of mine from primary had passed by here. She had gone, I think they had gone for a funeral at Langata. And that time the numbers were really restricted. So she passed by here. I said, let me just check on you. I had you in hospital. What would I said, you come, we will sit outside. So we sat outside. We actually were here. So my friend walks in with the nurse, the doctor. She comes with the nurse. They check my vitals and everything. I think she must have noticed something. And so I was going to use the bathroom in the house, and I find them whispering with my husband in the kitchen. So I told them, instead of whispering, just tell me, what is it? So they said, there seems to be something wrong with your heart. I think you need to go and see a cardiologist because there's something wrong with your heart. Now again, my heart. Yesterday it was my stomach. I have a bleeding. What is going on? So and I've never been sickly. So I'm like, okay. So they say, okay, let's. So I'm told, just dress up, just go and be checked, and then you come back home. So I remember when I was leaving the house, I told my children, I told them, boil the meat. I didn't have a house help, so I was like, boil the meat. I'm coming to cook when I can because I used to do the cooking, and that's how I left. So we leave, I go to hospital, I go to the cardiologist. Now, I don't like the lifts because I feel like I'm claustrophobic. So I don't like being in the lift, and it makes me really sick when I'm inside. I just feel like you fear heights. I mean, for me, I don't like being locked in. I have a fear of being locked in. So I told my husband, I'm not going to get into the lift. We've been told the doctor is on what floor? 4th floor. I told him we meet up. He said, so we start going up the stairs. Usually I've walked up to the 20th floor. So usually I would reach like halfway, I pause a bit, but still I'm not able to breathe. So I'm like, this one, I was struggling. I was actually feeling like I'm going to pass out. By the time I got to the doctor, my oxygen levels were at 45.
What?
And the doctor just looks at me, immediately puts me on oxygen. He tells me, Madam, what's going on? So he asked me, have you done he said, I think I need to do a COVID test. I said, I've already done a COVID test. I did it last night. So he said, okay, we will wait for the results. That is the time, it was the second phase of COVID. That is, people were really dying from that second strain of COVID. So the doctor looks at me, he says, and he would try to call hospitals where I can be admitted. All hospitals were full. So thank God, Avenue was open. So I got a space at Avenue. By the time I was getting into Avenue, now this is about 18th. By the time I'm getting into Avenue, the room that I was supposed to be given, somebody came in very sick in an ambulance. Since I was still walking around, I didn't look that sick. My room was given to that lady who was very sick. And unfortunately, actually, she passed on that night. So I was put in this, it was like a hall. And I was all by myself. And then because now I couldn't breathe on my own anymore, so I was on oxygen already. The first time, I think the oxygen was not going through the wall very well because I was put the one that is on the wall, not the tank.
Oh.
Because where I had been put was a place where they check first to confirm your COVID status before they know what to do with you. So they'll give you like a day or a few hours there. And then now they know whether they're taking you to the COVID ward or where they're going to take you. Before that, the oxygen was not going very well. So I collapsed. So then they had to bring in a tank, an oxygen tank, so that I can be able to help me breathe. So they put me on the oxygen tank, and then they said, you need to just lie down. We will tell you when we shall move you because we don't know your status yet. We have to be sure. After like close to 5 hours, I called because I needed to go to the bathroom. So, because now you can't, when you're on the oxygen tank, the tank is that big tank. So you can't pull it. So they have to come up with a way. Either they give you one that you can drag to the toilet and then you come back so that you can be again put onto the bigger one, because you can't go dragging this big cylinder.
Yeah.
So when I called them, they were like, sit there. And they changed, they became very different. And I'm asking myself, what has happened? Why are they behaving like this? All of a sudden they put on PPEs. I mean, it's not rocket science. You already know you're COVID positive, but nobody is telling you you're COVID positive. So from their personality and their changes, and having also studied psychology, you read the nonverbals and everything, and you're like, oh, this is what is going on. Okay. So the next thing, I was put on a wheelchair and I was taken to the COVID ward. I was put on machines because now they have to check I told you my oxygen at that time was at 45. My heart rate had to be checked. My blood pressure had to be checked. So I was hooked to so many machines. I'm like, dakika mbili tu hivi. I'm in all these machines and there's a monitor and checking all these things that I'm thinking, okay, things happen quite fast. So because I couldn't sleep with the noise, I removed everything. I told them I need to sleep and I can't sleep with this noise. I'm going crazy. I need to sleep. So when I yanked everything, apparently at that point is actually when I died. And I remember hearing them calling me, Elizabeth, please. But they were very far. But that is all I remember anyway. So apparently at that point is when actually I had to be resuscitated. Actually, according to the doctor, I died and I was resuscitated. This time, my husband has been called and he's been told that I've taken a turn for the worst. If they know how to pray, they better pray. Because the way it's going, and then they put my things in a paper bag and gave my husband. This was at midnight on the 19th. Now remember, I had written to God on the 12th, but I want to lose weight.
Yeah.
So 19th, now I have been resuscitated. Later is now when they checked my scans, they realized 95% of my lungs had been eaten up by COVID.
What?
I only had 5% working. That is why my oxygen levels were going that low. So they were like, they cannot work with me because I was yanking everything. So they put me in a coma. So they actually intubated me.
Scary.
So I was intubated and I was in a coma for 2 weeks. So within of course, everybody is worried. We are wondering how is it going. And also there had been many stories of everybody who's been intubated, they didn't survive.
Yeah.
So here I am also, I've been intubated. So 2 weeks, I was in a coma. So they started noticing I'm moving my hands and they started realizing I'm coming back. I'm coming from the coma. So I woke up, of course, there's this thing, I was being fed through the nose because I couldn't swallow anything because I had the tube down my throat. Of course, I had pegs everywhere for the toilet and for everything. So by this time, I was in ICU. So I stayed in ICU for 2 months in ICU because I was hooked to machines throughout. So when I started now coming back, of course I couldn't talk because of the tube. So I used to write. And then I realized if I sit here doing nothing, thank God I'm a therapist. I asked for a paper and a pen. So I would just journal everything. And then I would sit down and ask them what date. I would write, what date is it? So I'm told. So I'm trying to calculate backwards. Now, remember, I had told the doctor that he releases me in hospital. I have a thesis to go and defend. So here I am. It's 19th November. I'm supposed to graduate on 11th December. So I was like, I was supposed to be graduating, so I couldn't. So I was like, vile ninakaa hapa hata kutoka, it's not right now. So then they realized that I was in a room by myself. Now after like 3 days, they removed the tube. And a lot of them, all doctors surrounding me because it was not going very well when they were removing the tubes. But I remember one of the doctors asking me, do you mind? Can we pray before we remove the tube? I said, yes, let's pray. So we prayed and the tube was removed and I was okay. But I had to keep clearing my throat because it kept feeling like there's something stuck in my throat. So like for 1 month I was being observed because I was critical. So after like a month, the strain I had was so bad. Even after the first 14 days, it didn't clear. So I continued being in now ICU, but ICU, the COVID ward, because I couldn't be removed because I still had COVID. So I had to go another 14 days because it was not showing clear. And unless it shows clear, you cannot be moved to the next ward. But now you see the problem was when you're there, the doctors can't stay with the PPEs or the nurses throughout because those things were quite ilikuwa inaweka joto sana, so it was stressful. And then by this time, even you don't know who is attending to you because you can't see their faces. Actually, a lot of people died from COVID, not because of the disease. It's the loneliness. It's not being able to associate with people. My husband only used to come twice a week to see me. He couldn't come any other day. So he only come on Wednesday and Saturday. So the rest of the time, anyway, I was so heavily sedated half the time. I remember the first time he came to visit, he also had to wear PPEs. And so this time I had just started now talking, but still I was being fed through the nose because they still had to make sure that my systems were all working well before I start eating using my mouth. And so he comes in and he's in PPEs and then he starts telling me, the kids have said hello, so he mentions my children's names. And I'm thinking, who is this? Who knows my children? And he tells me, and your mother says hi. And I'm thinking, and because I can't see him clearly, and I also have not seen him like for a month, and I'm still trying to come back, I'm like, who is this? So when he walked out, I called the nurse. I asked the nurse, who was that who was here? So she says, that's your husband. And I'm like, no. Oh my God. Oh, my husband, Mutunga, Paul, he was at a year. I'm like, no, that he didn't sound like him. And of course, the PPEs would also muffle his voice. Anyway, so he's the only one who would come. There's no one else who would come. My siblings would pray from wherever they are. So after that, after 1 month, I was COVID negative. Wow. So now I was moved now to the other ICU because still, like I said, I couldn't breathe on my own. So I had this. I started with a 15-liter oxygen mask. Now that one is, you breathe in and it comes out like a balloon. So even eating, you would have to open it up a little bit, put food and then put it back because you can't, so if you don't do that, you will collapse because your oxygen is not going to your lungs because your lungs are so damaged. So I started with a 15-liter. Then now I was started being recuperated. They're trying to make me stand. I had not stood for so long. So I'd lost the use of my legs. And while I was there in ICU, now this second ICU, the doctor walks up to me and tells me, Madam, I need to have a conversation with you, and a candid conversation. For the rest of your life, you will never breathe on your own, and you'll never walk on your own again. So you will be stuck to a wheelchair, and you'll have to carry oxygen.
Were you scared?
For me, I was very angry. I was like, no, that's not my message. I told him, no, imagine I will walk, I will breathe, and I refused. In my mind, I was like, return to sender. That is not my message. I am going to walk, I am going to breathe on my own. So when my husband came, I was very angry. Actually, guess what he said? He said that I'm not going to breathe on my own ever, and I'll never walk by myself again. And I'm like, no, I'm going to walk. And let me tell you, what made me stay alive was the thought of my children. Because I hadn't seen them for so long, so I kept asking her, are they? Then my husband also had COVID. This period I am sick in hospital. But his was not as bad as mine was. So he was at home. It was home care. So my son, who was a candidate that time, he was on taking care of everybody. So you can imagine he was 17. So he's caring for his parents, his dad. And then my husband now has to put on like double mask, come and see me in hospital. Because even him, it took like 5 tests for it to clear. That strain was horrible. The second strain, it was horrible. So when the doctor told me that, I was like, no. Imagine I will breathe, I'll walk, I'll do everything. I remember when you were saying that, one of the days I needed to, because of course now I can't walk. So a mosquito, because I said you're not talking to anyone, there's no one in the room with you. Other times you'd just be told, if things get worse or if you see your oxygen tank going very low, call us so that we can come and bring you another tank. But sometimes you could have slept. So after a month, I was moved now from the 15-liter oxygen mask to now 10-liter, and finally 5 to the one that now they put in the nostrils. So they were like, the way it's going, we can move you to a normal ward.
Wow.
So I was moved to a normal ward, but since I was still not walking, I had to be given an acid to help me because I couldn't go to the bathroom. So still now I had to be put on diapers because you can't use the bathroom, you can't do nothing, you can't move yourself, you can't shower. So then they said, now that I have moved to the ward and I look like I can stabilize, because my bill also was really huge because I was on the ventilator and everything. And every time you put on the ventilator, your bill would go up. So by the time it was agreed that I need to leave hospital, my bill was 6 million.
6 million.
6 million. So 2 months, but in ICU throughout. I only went the last few weeks to a normal ward. Actually, it was days in a normal ward. And then now they decided, why don't you go home and recuperate from home? And for me, in my mind, I was like, yeah, for sure. These people now want to kill me completely because I didn't die in hospital. Now they want to send me home to die because now I am going home. There are no nurses. But what the good thing was, my sister is a doctor, and I thank God for that. Remember when I was telling you the Alzheimer story, how she's one of the people who my dad had refused to educate. So I took her, taken her to school, and she had qualified to become a doctor. So my sister flew in from the States and came and made sure that my house was like an ICU ward. So I remember being brought home in an ambulance. And I remember my son was standing here because the ambulance came and I had not to be removed with a stretcher. And my son said, oh, you look like a hero. These are how heroes come home. And I'm thinking, wow. And they came only
Still
once.
on the wheelchair.
Yes, like I still couldn't walk. It took a while. I came home December 31st because of like, you cannot cross the year in hospital. We want you to go home. So I was brought, I don't even remember how 2021 New Year looked like because I was also I was heavily sedated on medication. So I came home and I started recuperating. I had to have nurses to help me move around. But like I said, I wasn't walking. So a lot of things were being done on the bed. Then I had to get a physiotherapist now to start working on my legs. Let me tell you, I think physio was the most painful. It was a painful journey. It was painful. And so finally, anyway, I would not do exercise, try and walk to the gate, come back. But even as I'm walking to the gate, they are trying to teach me not to get so used to oxygen, the tank. And by the time I just get there, 45. So I have to run back, put oxygen again, breathe in more, and then start slowly. So I started walking around the estate to try and work on my lungs, because my lungs needed to be strengthened to go back. So, yes, so it took me close to almost a year, because I started breathing on my own around September 2021. That is now when I started breathing on my own.
That's when things returned to normal.
Well, it was not normal because it was, at least I could breathe. I could go like a whole 12 hours without oxygen, but then I would have to sleep with oxygen because I couldn't stay. I remember my son was doing his Form 4 then, and my son's prayer was, Mom must take me for my exams.
Wow.
And so he was like, Mama, my exams start in March. You must start learning how to breathe on your own. So I would take him and I would have to keep breathing in and out loudly in the car. And so it was a process. It was a process. And then the other thing that was very affected was my mental health. Because of now being locked in. Like I told you, I don't like being locked in. No, here I'm in ICU. I've been locked in. I remember even the people who would really encourage me were the cleaners. Eliza, Amka, you cannot stay like that for the rest of your life. You need to get home. Your children are waiting for you. Those are the people who are pushing. I tell you, those people are amazing. The other day, I called each one of them to say thank you.
Wow.
Send them something small and say, hey,
that's nice.
You're an amazing team. So, yes, that is in a nutshell my journey with COVID.
What was the hardest moment during that time?
For me, just sitting on that bed, and you can't sleep anyway because you can't say you will turn this way or this way. You have to sleep up because the oxygen has to go in. So it was a very cumbersome time. And also the other hard thing was anytime I needed to go to hospital, an ambulance had to be called because I can't breathe on my own. So it has to be an ambulance that has oxygen so that I can get to hospital.
And how are you managing? Because remember during COVID, not everyone was able to afford the services. For you, how are you managing? Because the ambulance was coming back for the fault. You have to be taken back to the hospital. How are you managing?
I will just tell you it's God, because you can see, like I said, my bill was 6 million. So already, it has already put a dent in your finances. By this time, even insurance was not even paying for you. NHIF was not paying for you. So you had to look for the money. So it was really a costly affair. I mean, a lot of sacrifices had to be made to get to hospital, because you need to go to hospital, unfortunately. Yeah. So it was quite a journey. I mean, even seeing specialists, lung specialists and everything, it's not cheap. It's not cheap. And you're not seeing a lung specialist alone. You also need to see a psychiatrist. Like I said, I had my mental well-being was really affected. So I was having serious anxiety and depression, because now I think after now I had survived and fought. Now I think I started panicking and I'm worrying and I'm like, hey, he said I'll never walk again. Then I'm like, no, you'll walk again. So I'm having all these wars in between. And then also the psychiatric medications were not helping me. As in, when I say not helping much is because they also have side effects.
Yeah.
So you're having all that. I used to take over 20 tablets because I have to make sure that I am on tablets to make sure that I don't get clots, because I am sleeping throughout and I'm not walking. So I had like 20 tablets. Like in hospital, many times, because I had not used my hands for very long, I couldn't even cut meat. And I would keep telling them, please bring me food that imekatakatwa. Sasa, I mean, we are so many patients, nani ataanza kukuangalia peke yako. So half the time I couldn't eat. So you remember my prayer to lose weight? That's how I lost weight. Because now there's no one to feed you. Yeah. So sometimes I would either ask for just juice, but I'll still be charged for the food, but I didn't eat because I can't cut. So I would tell them, then can I ask them to bring me food from home so that I can be able to eat something? So I would take tablets on, even I don't know, it's God that I actually didn't collapse in that period, because I was having like 20 tablets to swallow on a daily basis. When COVID was starting, like I said, we didn't know anyone with COVID, so you're all thinking it could be a story. Because nobody has been affected that you know who has COVID until I got COVID, and I was like, wow, okay. But for me, whether it was a scam or not, I was very careful with everything I did. I would wear my mask. I would do everything I needed to do. Make sure I'm not going to crowded places. Me, like functions, I stopped going for functions because I felt we've been told not to go. Why am I going? So I wouldn't go for weddings. I wouldn't go for funerals. I would stay in the house. So by the time you get it, you're thinking, I did everything right. What happened? So, yeah.
And your family, when they got the news that you had tested positive, how was their reaction?
So in fact, even Ministry of Health called each one of them, and they were told they all have to go for tests. We were hearing the stories of the calls from Ministry. Ministry would call you. So my husband and I tested the night before. Remember when I said we went for a test? I just said, let's go check. So when we went, we tested, the two of us. We were both positive. But the kids were not, thank God, because I have one daughter who's asthmatic. So I was a bit worried for her. So my kids did not get COVID. But of course, my kids were worried. My son told me one day he came down. I think that's the day when my husband had been given my things in a paper bag. And when he came down, he found the dad sitting outside here. And from his demeanor and the way he looked, my son had gone. And so my son, he tells me he ran up. He almost fell as I was running up the stairs because we were like, my God, mommy has died. Mommy has died. And then my husband is trying to be strong for them and everything. So each one of them handled it in their own way. My son speaks, so I know exactly what my son felt. And then also for him, it was a year for exams. So I'm grateful to God. Amidst all that, he got a B. I did not even expect he would perform that well because it was a very stressful time. I mean, he was even not able to do exams because now when his parents, he's told the school his parents have been confirmed that it's positive, he couldn't go to school. So he had to do his exams online. What? And so it was quite hard. Yeah. I'm just imagining for teenagers on their own. My daughter until today has clammed up. She doesn't talk about it. She tells you that part of my brain, I shut down. And she will never tell you what she went through. But once in a while, they'll talk to my son. Then my sister when my sister came, I think that's when they talked a lot. And they said their fears. And I remember one day, I was sleeping on the bed. I made a ward. My ward was down here. And one of the days, you know how you can feel like their eyes looking at you. So I opened my eyes. And she was just standing there looking at me. And then she asked me, Mom, for the rest of your life, you will never walk again. You'll never breathe. Who will be driving with us? Because we used to go everywhere, the three of us. We were always hanging around each other. She's like, what will happen? You'll never walk with us again. You'll never talk. We will never go for drives. So I told her, imagine, no, we will do all those things. We will go for the walks. And this time I'm not even walking. And she's just looking at me. Then when I came, everything was very loud. So even when they were talking, I'd keep telling them, keep quiet. And I was this mother who would make noise with them, jump up with them. Now all of a sudden I've turned, I'm like, stop making noise. It became just something else. And I'm thinking, what happened to her? Why did she change? So yes, it was a hard time for each one of them. I'm not saying my husband shed tears talking about that story, but he talks with a lot. I think it was a very emotional. The other day I read some of the messages that were being sent to people. So I have very many people who are praying. And my son used to tell me he used to update about 300 people on a daily basis on how I'm faring. And I remember reading one of the messages that had been sent when they're saying how my lungs are, I don't know, looking what the doctor has said and everything. I was like, these people used to get shocks every day because, me, I'm in hospital. I'm not in contact with what is happening in the world. Really, it's like you're in another planet until now when I started healing, that's when you start coming back. But it was quite a journey.
Yeah, but thank God your family managed.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, and like I said, there's always God has a mission and a purpose for everyone. I think God still had a mission for you. That's why He gave you a second chance.
I agree, because half of the people actually who really prayed for me were the caregivers I help with their family, with their loved ones with dementia. I remember one of them saying, we told God, you can't take her. How do you take her? And she's the one who helps us. So some of these things that you do, and sometimes it doesn't look like you've done anything good, they come back to be a blessing to you, because it's because of all that. So with the hospital bill, what happened? The people came together and raised money. I'm forever grateful.
Wow.
They raised the money. friends, church, people even who didn't know me, people from even the UK, Nigeria, people who I had helped once, people just came to help. And so the money was raised like that.
So, and the whole bill was paid,
Was
6
settled.
million, the 6 million.
To settle it.
Wow. And maybe what was prayer one of the things that kept you
Yes.
and gave you more hope? Because that doctor told you, you'll never walk again, you'll never breathe on your own. What's the other thing that gave you hope?
So I prayed, I read my Bible. My Bible was with me in hospital. And I remember one of the nurses later telling me that because my Bible has my children's photos, so she thought my children were really small because of the photos she was seeing in my Bible. And then she would tell God, please don't take these children, don't take this mother because her children are really small. So that, and then I also used to journal a lot and talk to God. Because now you have no one else to talk to. So I would write, I have a whole journal here that I used to write. And by that time, my hands were really shaky. So I would really struggle to write. So you look at my handwriting at that time and now, of course, there's a big difference. So that, and also just talking to myself, encouraging myself. Sometimes you just have to do that. Oh, did I tell you? I actually met that doctor.
Wow.
Who told me that I'll never walk and breathe on my own. And
After how long?
I remember around November 2021, and I was with my son. I was like, no, we have to stop. He's looking at me, Mom, we're in the middle of nowhere. Why do we have to stop? I said, no, we have to stop. So we stopped the car and I walked up to the doctor and I was like, hi, doc. How are you? And he looks at me, fine. And then I'm like, my name is Elizabeth. Do you remember me? He says, no. Then I said, 95% lung involved. Oh, it is you. And that confirms what people were saying, that when people had COVID, you were not treated as a human being, you were treated as a statistic. Because even when the statistics were being read, it's this number of people have COVID, these ones have come out of hospital. So you are a number. Yeah. You are not actually really a human being, unfortunately. So when I told him 95% lung involvement, he says, oh, yeah, it is you. And you could see he was looking at me, but he's trying to look behind to see if I have oxygen. So I turned. And I told him,
I think he was ashamed.
I'm not walking with an oxygen. How long did it take you? How did you start breathing on your own? I told him it's been a long time, but within the 3rd month, because I started March when my son was going for exams. I used to do now, I would stay morning without oxygen and then at night I would be put again on oxygen. So I told him about 3 months. Now I know what to tell my patients. I told him, Doc, one thing I want to tell you, God has given you the ability to help people. Please don't kill people. Yeah. Give people hope. Yeah. Even if it is hopeless. Yeah. There was this one doctor, and I went back to say thank you. That doctor actually would walk into the ward and my oxygen levels would always be up. As long as that doctor is in the ward, my oxygen levels would go up because he was encouraging. He said, no, move her from that big oxygen. Mm. We need to start training her to use the smaller ones. And I would be fine. As long as this other one, I'm sorry to say, he would walk in, oxygen would just go down. So even what I really want to tell people is, don't listen to everything that people tell you, because actually a lot of people even died from those kind of statements because somebody told you you can't make it, you can't survive, and you believe it. And now when you believe it, you start working on your mind, and your mind, if you believe everything people tell you, it's very hard to fight it. So you really have to tell yourself, you know what, no, I'm going to fight this. Even if it's a very bad report, fight it, walk. Now, that day he looked at me, was like, and I told him, no, I don't use oxygen. I use oxygen, yes, for a while. I used to work with, even going to see the doctor appointments, I went with oxygen. But every time I would go see the doctor, the pulmonologist, he'll tell me, from your scans, you should be dead. You cannot be alive. How can you be surviving with only 5% lungs? And I tell him it is God. And then the next time he'll tell me, and I tell him, next time when I come, they'll be better. My oxygen levels will be better.
So, Elizabeth, did you face discrimination during that time?
Yes. I know we all were scared of COVID. Everyone handled us very differently. There are those who then maybe would bring stuff and maybe they want just to leave it at the gate. Others would want to come into your house. Others are very cautious around you. But a number of places I went, and people who knew I had COVID, you would see them, and that's the problem of being a therapist, a psychologist rather, because you read nonverbals. Not even reading people's minds. It's your nonverbals, how you're behaving. And so there are places I would walk in. I remember there's somebody, I went for a function, and just because I had COVID, and I don't think she realized, but of course the masks go up. Then the next thing is like, oh no, you need to use use a sanitizer. And of course you can already tell what somebody's trying to say. So yes, there are people who would not come very near you. Others would not want to be hugged. Although we were not hugging much, it was a lot of fist bumps and everything. But yes.
Or when you are now in the recovering process at your home, during the isolation process, what was happening? What was running through your mind?
So by the time I came home, I was already negative. I was COVID negative. But of course, I think of what I went through, I didn't want people visiting. Because still, we were not so sure how COVID came. And then since also the immune system was not as strong, so you try and minimize the number of people who would come. And also since here, when I was at home recovering, I wouldn't walk around a lot. So I'd either be stuck in the bed or pull oxygen, because I came home with oxygen tanks and then I had to buy a concentrator so that I can pull it while I'm walking around. So the concentrator is the one I walked around with most. And then you see also the oxygen huchoma. So it burns your mouth. You're in pain. So you wouldn't want a lot of people coming, because you can get infected because your immune system is very low. So people would come, yes, to visit, but they would have to sit outside. And I think even me, I didn't want a lot of people visiting. I was also I think the trauma of what I went through in the hospital, I didn't want people visiting at that time. So even me, I was like, don't come. Just stay away from me.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you really fully recovered. And maybe what would you love to say to your husband, your kids who are there for you? They didn't leave, they were just there to take good care of you. What's the message that you can tell them? Maybe they will watch this video. And your sister also.
And my sister. And my mother. My mother used to sleep.
The entire
so
family.
I really want to say thank you. I'm honored that you stood by me and supported me. I think even it was harder when I came out from hospital. I think I was not very pleasant. I got out of hospital because of all that I had gone through. So I had my own fears. My mental health well-being was not very good. So I think I was a full-time job. I can say that. I would snap at anything. So for them to just take it out and still hang around me and want to support me, I'm grateful to my sister who stopped her life for a whole month. She came home to take care of me. She left her family, her husband, her children, her house, her job to come and sit with me. My mom, being elderly, would once in a while come to check on me.
Wow.
Other times I would go through an emotional breakdown and I would cry and I'm saying, you can't leave me. And so she had to spend some nights here with me. My kids, especially my firstborn son, Leroy, he running a house at 17. I did that with my dad when my dad had dementia. So it was very interesting that he also did that when he was 17, taking care of the house. I'm forever grateful for that. Leanne supporting him. Leanne is my daughter. My husband just trying to put things together and hold the fort while I was away. And even coming to see me twice. I mean, when I was in the ICU now for COVID, he only could come twice. But these other days, he came to hospital faithfully. Like I said, he still had COVID, but he came. He came faithfully to see me. So I'm forever grateful for that. I mean, he must have been feeling pain, aches, tiredness, and all those things. but he came faithfully to see me. So I'm thankful.
And maybe to the people who helped to raise the medical bill.
Yes, second person's really everybody all over the world. Thank you for standing by me. I know I've said thank you before. I did a video to say thank you. I still have a bash to say thank you. I will have it.
You'll organize.
I will organize a bash to do a proper thank you. But I'm very grateful, and above all to God for just allowing me to survive.
Yeah. What is the biggest lesson that you have learned as a survivor of COVID-19?
I think my biggest lesson is don't take people for granted. You cannot survive on your own. You need people. I mean, if I stayed like as an island and I never worked with people, interacted with people, then there would be no one to come and help me. I mean, people came every day, cooked for my children, took care of my children, brought my children food. I mean, it's because you have done something to others. So just making sure that you respect people, appreciate people. Then the other thing is you're on this world for a reason. And until your reason is over, you're going nowhere. So while you're here, make the best of the situation, appreciate people. Don't take life for granted. Because sometimes, the other day I was just telling somebody, have you ever thought about breathing? Do you ever think about it? Other than when we are told breathe in, breathe out, which was in school. But have you ever thought about breathing? But here you are, you can't breathe at all unless you have a gadget to help you breathe. Oxygen is free. You can't walk because you still have your legs, but you actually cannot walk out. So everything that we have in life, may we never take anything for granted. But one of the things, like with the long COVID, with anxiety and depression, I would sit every day like this, waiting, anxious, you're panicking. But one thing you need to know is that you're not in charge of your life. God is in charge of your life, and nothing will happen to you unless He says now it is going to happen. So just learning to be grateful. It was a near-death experience, and with near-death experiences, a lot of things go through your mind. I know a lot of people are asking me, when you could hear them, did you see a white light? You know the story about when you're dying and you're seeing a white light and you're taken into this world. I don't think I reached there. God returned me before that. But just being thankful every second, and not taking anything for granted.
What memory do you have about COVID?
What memory do you have about COVID?
Yeah.
Not being able to breathe. Even the other day, I put a post when I was with my mom and my auntie. They had come visiting, and just sitting on that chair and struggling to breathe. So for me, just breathing is that is all I remember. Not being able to breathe.
And to the people who believed that COVID never existed.
Oh, it existed. It existed. I will send you photos of my lungs, how they looked, so that they can see how my lungs looked. I'll send you photos of how I looked when I was in hospital. Yeah, it's been a journey.
But I thank God that He gave you a second chance. Like I said before, God had a purpose for you.
Oh, yeah.
And before we finish, Elizabeth, I want you to look at that camera and tell your people to subscribe to this channel. Because I noticed most of the people watch the videos and they don't subscribe. So if they subscribe, we will really appreciate you for that. So
okay, ladies and gentlemen, after watching this video, please subscribe, because when you subscribe, you make the stories go viral, it goes further, and then you will always know what they are doing, and they are doing an amazing job. So please subscribe.
Okay, I will just end our video from what Elizabeth has said. Thank you, Elizabeth, for creating time. I'm so happy. I'm so proud of you. Like I said, God had a mission for you. So keep pushing it, keep helping people, and God will reward you one day.
Amen.
So we thank you, our viewer, for always coming back to watch our videos. And if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to my channel so that you can get other stories that will inspire you. Hadi wakati mwingine, bye for now. My name is Aurelia Ngina.